going to press record at this time, so that we're going to record her presentation for viewing, and it'll be up for about the next 2 to 3 weeks for those parents that missed it. So if you have friends and others, you'll be able to kind of view this online. But thank you so much for joining us this evening, Dr. Rapp, and I'm going to turn the Zoom portal over to you at this time.
Thanks, Eleanor. Let me just share my screen and we'll get going here. Come on. Just doesn't want to start here.
It was working perfectly 15 minutes ago, I can promise.
Yes, it was, wasn't it? Let's see. There we go. All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm really very excited to be sharing this time with you. And Eleanor told you a little bit about myself. I'm Associate Professor of Inclusive Education at St. John Fisher College and the Associate Dean of the School of Education. I've been there for about 20 years. And I'm also the mom of 3 kids, which has been a much more challenging job. They are grown now, 24, 22, and 20 years old. My oldest and youngest received support services for disabilities throughout their school years. My oldest classification was other health impaired for significant executive function difficulties and sensory integration difficulties. And my youngest is hard of hearing and has dyslexia. So if you can imagine that, not being able to hear the audio supports for her reading disability, it was a challenge at times. So I have a lot of practice both professionally and personally coming up with individualized supports for students of all ages. I also want to note too, Eleanor's recording tonight so others can watch this, but if you see the note at the top of this slide, the content that I'm presenting tonight is excerpted from a working manuscript and can't be copied, distributed, posted online, or cited without express permission of the author, because as things change as I write, I have to make sure that everything's cited right. So, all righty. Also, as Eleanor mentioned, she's going to monitor the questions in the chat. So any time you think of a question that you want, just write it in the chat, and there'll be definitely time at the end to get to those. So I have 2 disclaimers that I always start with. The first is that I only have an hour-ish with you, and I won't be able to solve all the world's problems in that time, but maybe some of them. And the second is I don't have a magic wand, so I'm not going to present any strategy that there isn't one that I can give you that's going to be guaranteed to work every time. You know better than I do that the uniqueness of kids means you have to find the best fit for their needs. But this presentation should definitely give you the foundation you need and some good ideas for problem solving for whatever their unique situation is. All right. So, what is executive function? Lots of researchers summarize it in different ways and come up with different categories, but I'm going to focus on the 2 strands by Christopher Kaufman, as I think they give a really good overview about the academic and social skills that are impacted by our executive function. So, Kaufman lists 2 strands, the metacognitive strand and then social emotional regulation. So the metacognitive skills that are governed or controlled by your executive function are goal setting, planning, strategizing, sequencing, organizing materials, time management, task initiation, goal-directed attention, task persistence, working memory, and set shifting. And then the social emotional regulation skills that are impacted are response inhibition or impulse control, emotional control, and adaptability. So most of these are fairly self-explanatory, but I will mention a little bit about working memory and set shifting because those tend to be ones that people aren't as familiar with. So working memory is considered somewhat of a midway between things that are in your short-term memory and between bringing things into your short-term memory to process and understand them, and then moving them to your long-term memory for storage. So when you take things back out of your long-term memory storage, you lay them out on in your working memory, or kind of like a desktop in your brain while you work with them. So the larger and stronger your working memory, the more things you can take out of long-term storage and lay them out and keep track of them without losing anything. And then you more can effectively put them back in long-term storage where they belong, so you can use them next time. If working memory or desktop in your brain is not as large or strong, you can only take out a couple of things at a time and keep track of them before something's going to fall off the desktop, and then it doesn't get back into storage where you need it. And then set shifting or shifting is what really happens when we think of multitasking. It is true that people do not really multitask in the sense that they're doing more than one thing truly simultaneously. Really what is happening is that you're shifting very quickly between one or more tasks. So when you see somebody that seems to be able to do many things at a time, what they're really good at is shifting between those things and then going back to what they were working on before and finding their place and picking up where they left off. So that is set shifting. So looking at these two lists, you can see how pervasive our executive function is in our daily life. Executive function is neurological in nature. It does mature over time, but only to a point. It is part of our neurology. It's not our cognition or intelligence per se. Extremely intelligent people can have weak executive function. We're pretty much hardwired or born with the executive function we're going to have. They mature only over time. For females, generally they develop into their late teens or early 20s. For males, they develop well into the 20s, and some studies have shown as late as 30. So high school age kids and even college age students have adolescent immature brains and executive function. So there's hope. There's still some maturing to go. So it is affected by everything that affects our neurology. And if you're not aware, there are so many different things that affect the efficiency and effectiveness of your neurological pathways. Your diet, sleep, exercise, hormones, stress, the weather. For some kids, it's their sensory input. So if most of us are able to take in a lot of environmental stimuli and filter out what we don't need and just focus on what we do need, and some of us are not as able to filter it very well. So the brain takes in 800 plus or minus 800 bits of sensory stimuli every second. The colors around us, everything that we're seeing, everything that we're hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, our clothes, our butt on the seat, everything. There are hundreds of bits of sensory stimuli. And right now we're filtering most of that out. But some folks aren't able to do that quite as well. And the stress that of trying to make sense of what's going on around us as all of this sensory input is coming in is also going to affect how well your executive function processes. So they wax and wane depending on what's going on. If you're sleeping well and eating well and getting regular exercise, then they're going to be more efficient than, or the most efficient that they can be, versus times when you're not eating or sleeping well or exercising regularly, or you have some other stressor going on. So it's totally legit that you might see your kids organized and planful one week and then not so much the next week. There are steps back. They're not being lazy, and it's just that their neurological stars might not be all aligned that week. We noticed when our oldest when he had braces on, right around middle school, his executive function vastly improved every time he got his braces tightened. We're not really sure how to explain this, other than we think it might have worked a little bit like a weighted vest does for some kids, in that it kind of like drew all of, like grounded all of his focus in one place because of the ache. And then as it wore off, he got a little more flighty again. So we just took it as it came, and we were a little bit bummed when his braces came off. I can just tell you that. There's also inconsistent development. So for most kids who have difficulty with their executive function, they're not going to be developing on a nice smooth plane from point A to point B, or even in incremental steps, but it's going to look more like this jagged line. Well, they're making some progress and then backtrack a little, make more progress, backtrack a little. So if you look from point A to point B on this jagged line, there's definitely some improvement over time. It got higher, just not in a smooth plane. So you can expect some advances and some gaining of skills, and then a little bit of maybe not being so great at those skills anymore, and then they'll pick back up again. It's just the nature of the beast. So the other thing that's really important to talk about is the idea of cognitive tasks versus associative tasks. So if you think about things that are typical for adults, cognitive tasks might be some things like this, where we're solving math problems, writing an editorial, reading a research article, doing our taxes. It's going to take all of our focus while we're doing that. You can't do your taxes and be doing something else at the same time, usually. And then associative tasks are things that we come to think of as second nature tasks, things that you can do while you're doing something else. So we can often drive and talk to our kids and who are in the car with us. You can sort mail and carry on a conversation, or be checking on dinner and doing a couple other things at the same time. You can pack up your work bag while you're talking on the phone, log into Zoom while you're managing materials, things like that. So they could be things that we get so used to doing that we would consider second nature. For kids, it's the things that they do in school. Solving math problems, writing an essay, reading a textbook, taking a test are all going to be highly cognitive tasks. And for typical kids, something like heading their paper, logging into Zoom, packing their school bag, jotting something in their planner, sorting papers, even checking, going through their social media, could be second nature associative tasks. But for kids who have difficulty with their executive function, all of those things are cognitive tasks. It's very difficult for them to concentrate and do any of these effectively while doing something else, including carrying on a conversation. So when a student is working through a cognitive task, like trying to put the right paper in the right folder to get it back to school, and someone's also talking to them and expecting them to answer questions, they're going to lose track of what they're doing. They're not going to be able to shift back to putting the papers back in the folders and pick up where they left off or do it well. So that's one of the reasons why we're noticing things like materials getting lost, and you're saying, wait a minute, you just had that. And how, we were just putting it in the right folder. How did it end up in the wrong folder? And there was something that shifted their attention, and it was hard for them to get back at where they were. So cognitive tasks are going to use up most of our processing load. So if you consider this bar the typical processing load that somebody has, then somebody with strong executive function is going to use up maybe about just this little bit of red part as far as doing those associative tasks. So they have all that green part left to do cognitive tasks like math problems, writing an essay, taking a test. And then heading their paper or sorting papers in their folder are only going to take up about that much energy, that's depicted by that red block. But students who have difficulty with executive function, those associative tasks like heading a paper or sorting papers or packing their school bag or even carrying on a conversation is going to take up this much of their processing energy. So they have very little left over for the actual taking of the test. So if there's a lot of formatting things that they have to do ahead of time, and I'll actually use the math toolkits that they do in Brighton as a really great example. For One of my sons absolutely loved them. He was a very strong math student and had very strong executive functions. He actually took joy in cutting the pieces out and gluing them into the composition notebook and then solving the math problems and drawing the graphs. And then my other son, he didn't even have any energy left over for the math part, because the finding the materials that he needed and finding the right composition notebook and then cutting up the problems and then pasting them, he was done. He was exhausted. And so he was spending all of this processing load bar on formatting things, and he had nothing left over to spend on the actual cognitive task. When we should think about some of the social emotional regulation things that are happening that are also associated with executive function. And this really was something, and I mean, we learned about it about 20 years ago, but somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago, that we thought there were two different things going on with our son, that he was having these organizational and time management and keeping track of materials issues, and then he was having social skill issues at the same time. And we were thinking two separate things were going on, but they were both, executive function is responsible for both of those things. And so that was when we were really clued into executive functioning disorder is what was going on. But so your response inhibition is the stop and think part of your brain. So it's if you have a strong response inhibition, you are able to inhibit a prepotent response, while you have time to think through what it is you want to do or how you want to respond. So first, a strong response inhibition is supposed to stop you, and then you use your working memory to take all of your potential options, outcomes, reactions out, consider them all. And then you use your social flexibility or cognitive flexibility and planning to choose the best and most appropriate option or response, and then do that. And all of this happens in a split second, so many times a day. And so we are using our response inhibition without knowing it. If it's working right, we're using it without knowing it. We're thinking about how we want to respond. We think of the right, appropriate words to use. We think of, things that are going to be socially acceptable in that context. If it's not working well, we know it because it doesn't inhibit our responses, and we often are not choosing between multiple things. We're just doing the first thing that comes to mind, and sometimes it's not the most appropriate. Stress affects this quite a great deal. My son once said that, he said, when I'm very, very stressed, it's like a sieve in my brain, and it shakes out all the good ideas. So when I reach for an idea, only the bad ones are left. So I think he was about 8 at the time. So for an 8-year-old to be able to articulate that, what I thought was pretty amazing. But he knew what was going on, but he didn't have the ability to really control and do it any differently without support. So emotional control is a different piece of this too. And what's going on is the limbic system that's at the base of your brain creates emotion. It's kind of like the steam engine for your brain. And then the prefrontal cortex, the blue part in the front, is what regulates how you express that emotional control. So it's kind of like the vent or the valve for the steam that's just always getting created by your limbic system. So you have this limbic system that's creating these emotions. Emotions are all fine, to have, but you need your prefrontal cortex to make sure that you're dealing with them as they come and venting them in a little bit at a time appropriately. So the steam engine works even if the vent does not. Those emotions are going to keep coming even if they're not getting vented over time. So kids who exhibit inappropriate behaviors don't necessarily have worse emotions. They might just have faulty vents. So sometimes what we'll see is a student becoming, increasingly stressed, and then one tiny little thing will happen, like they drop their pencil, or they can't find their pencil, or they just had their homework and now it's not there, and they will explode. And it's not because they have worse emotions or worse reactions to them. They've been holding up a whole lot of steam all day long, and it hasn't been vented yet. And so it's going to all come out at once when it finally goes. And then social adaptability is the last piece. And it's like set switching. If you were doing an academic task, it's the same thing, being able to transition with speed and ease in a social context, across social contexts, or within a highly complex situation. So when we're at rest, when our routine is predictable, when we know what's going on, when we're in a situation where we're really comfortable, like home with our favorite people, it works better, and we tend to be more appropriate, and we kind of are able to think through what we want to do. It's at work and it's stressed when you are going through any unexpected changes, or there's rapid fire events. There's a lot of people talking at once, a lot of things are coming at you, and you don't have time to think of the right response. You get a little short. We've all been there. So for students, they are trying the best to keep track of what's going on around them. And sometimes they'll say something and it'll seem really like an inappropriate response, but they could be responding to something that happened 2 or 3 minutes ago, or something that somebody said to them 2 or 3 exchanges ago. And their response seems really out of place, but they're responding to the last thing they were able to process in that situation, or they're responding in a way that's showing their frustration and their stress, which might not always be fun. So, okay, so how does this play out at school and home? What does it really mean? One of our favorite questions that we ask our kids is, did you do your homework? And for most of our kids, they are able to think through, oh, well, I had this for math, and I had this for English, and I had this for social studies, and yeah, I did all that, and they're back in my bag. So yes, I did my homework. And they can hold all of that in their mind. And they know by this one question what it is that you mean. For kids who are struggling with their executive function, this question actually, did you do your homework, actually means all of these different things, because each of the pieces of getting their homework done is a cognitive task. So the actual doing of the English assignment or the math task is not the only cognitive thing. Identifying the assignment, locating the planner, copying the assignment into the planner, bringing home the books and worksheet and folders they need. And then once they get home, locating all that stuff, and then matching the assignment in the planner with the materials needed. Doing the assignment, which is what we meant when we asked, did your homework, is really only one thing on this list. And then storing it where it needs to go, bringing that folder back to school, putting it in the right place in class, locating it when it's time to submit it. So, and then in a remote world, when we're learning remotely and they're signing into Schoology, it's, signing in with their username and password, accessing Schoology, opening the link for math class, getting the materials, finding that document, opening it, storing it, saving it, and getting it back where it needs to belong. And this is just for one subject on Schoology. So if all of the subjects are there, and the teacher's just using Schoology, let alone, OneNote, News ELA, Quizlet, Castle Learning, all the different things, there's dozens of clicks and things that the students have to do before they even get to the assignment, and they can very well be exhausted by them. So if you're asking your child, did you do your homework? And they have to think through everything that doing their homework entails and how much work that was. A lot of times they'll just tell us yes, even when that's not true, because it's so overwhelming and defeating to think about. They almost have no choice. It's just, it really is tackling a mountain. So the impact over time for kids who, don't, they know the stuff and they just have a difficulty getting it where it needs to be, how it needs to be, and when it needs to be there. And over time, you know, getting reminded that they don't have something, or being asked where it was, and oh my goodness, did you lose it again? After a while, it means, and then with their social skill difficulties, having difficulty making friends, or always being appropriate with peers, or being successful in making plans to socialize. After a while, it takes a toll emotionally, where they start to see themselves as a bad student, irresponsible, lazy, not smart, unlikable. When none of these things are true, it is just, they just keep getting reminded of what's not going right on a daily basis. And they don't hear enough of what is going right, about, you know, all the things that they're learning and all the things that they are able to do. We lost so many hats and mittens and boots and notebooks and things over the years. And then at the end of the year, when locker clean out came around, all of that stuff would come home. And I just kind of waited for it. You know, I can't find my boots. Are they at school? No, they're not at school. I looked. Okay, we'll get you another pair of boots. And then come, you know, the end of the year and locker clean out, there were the boots. And so my other son said once, he said, I don't mean to be mean, but how do you lose something in a locker? It's a finite space. I was like, well, your finite space is your brother's like closet to Narnia. Like it goes in and it is just not coming back out. There's a million, you know, so even locating things in a finite space can be difficult, because it's whatever they're processing when they're trying to look for something might make it a very highly cognitive task. So we need to counteract that and shift in our thinking, from defining responsible as being organized and neat. That is not what responsible means. We tell our kids all the time, you need to be more responsible, keeping track of things, making sure that your room is neat and your backpack's neat and your locker's neat and your desk is neat and things like that. But that is not really what responsible means. Being responsible means being answerable or accountable for something that's within your power or control or management. And struggling in school doesn't necessarily mean you're not smart. If you're struggling in school, it means there's a mismatch between the environment and what your abilities are. A good student isn't one that has naturally strong executive functions, although those are the students that we would that are typically described as good students, as the ones that have their homework neatly done and on time all the time, regardless of whether the content is particularly strong. A good student is one who can maximize the natural executive functions they have, and then know when to utilize the external strategies for the rest of it. And really what is happening is that, you know, whatever is not happening internally with our executive functions, we have to make sure that we're providing a support externally. It may never be internal. We can keep working on it and keep, you know, trying to, you know, show them what it is that they need to be doing. But like I said earlier, we're hardwired with pretty much what we're going to get. So coming up with strategies isn't something that's going to make this magically be an internal skill. What we need to do is help them understand when they need to utilize their external strategies for that. And it might mean changing IEP goals from saying things like students will keep materials organized and hand homework in on time to students will utilize strategy to locate materials and submit homework. So that we're focusing on the goal of utilizing strategies, recognizing the need and finding the ones that are appropriate for that time, rather than becoming more organized naturally. The difference is subtle, but it focuses on what the student is going to be able to control and be responsible, and it's going to build their self-efficacy instead of break it down. All right, so as I move into some ideas for strategies, the few things that you want to keep in mind is your goal is to reduce the processing load and free up as much of their brain energy as you can so that they can do the content and the cognitive processing that you want them to do. What's not internal must be external. And remember the nature of neurologically based disabilities, that they are impacted by so many things around us in our environment, that the more that we take care of ourselves and help kids to understand how those things are going to impact their processing, the better. So I split them up into some strategies for academics versus social emotional regulation. So planner options. we had a doozy of a time with the school issued planner. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, and it was like a homework assignment in itself to use the planner. The subjects were not in the same order as he had subjects in school. And so we played this game a lot. He'd come home and it would say, okay, your English homework is to answer the questions on page 18. And we'd open the English book up to page 18 and it would be blank, or it would be not a page with questions on it. And we'll say, okay, maybe that was math. And we'd look up, math, page 18. Nope, that's not it. Maybe it was page 81. And then we check page 81 in all the books. And then by the end, I'm like, I give up. I have no idea what that was. We'll just have to ask the teacher tomorrow. And so, and then when he would get back to school, and then there were some things like the pods that they sat in class, that if everybody had their planners filled out right, that pod would get a prize or a point or a star for the day. And Sam's pod never won because it was extremely rare that the whole planner was filled out correctly. So, sending that message to kids that is what earns them a prize at school, and that's something that they really can't control no matter how hard they try, is difficult, and it wears on your self-confidence after a while. So what we did is we came up with a customized planner for him. This is one of those small little notebooks. It's about 2 by 3 inches, and you can buy them at Barnes & Noble or other places, and it hinges closed, and then the pen holds it closed. So it's almost an automatic reminder that if it's not holding closed, then you don't have the pen with you. So, he lost the little pen a lot of times, but another pencil would stick in there, but it would remind him that he needed a writing utensil with him, because that's what held the planner closed. And then we just printed off the computer the pages in the order that he had the subjects. So he just filled it out from top down during the day. And there was a space for him to write what he should work on during his resource room, and a space where he should work on after school while he was waiting for practice to start, and things like that. So this worked really well for him. So this exact thing might not be what is the best match for your student, but the idea is that you kind of work through a couple of iterations until you find out what is going to come a little bit more naturally to them, and just take up less of that processing energy and just make more sense. And then we had a little space for him to write down when it was due and check when it was done, and then when it was handed in, he would cross it off. And so he helped come up with that system, and it made sense for him rather than trying to impose somebody else's system on him. So kids who are learning at home, and I would like to think that we're moving away from that, and that we won't end up quarantined again, but having a chart on the wall with photos of what is due for each class, screenshots or something like that, or, just list on a wall what they're working on that day. So it's posted near their workstation. It can be helpful. Having checklists, they're not going to be able to hold in their head what they need in their bag or what materials they need for a homework assignment. So list them on a bookmark or on a luggage tag and attach it to their backpack or whatever else they carry around with them. There was a luggage tag on her swim bag for ages, reminding him to have everything that he needed for swim in there. And eventually it does get in there. It's just going to take a lot longer than it might for typically for him to remember what needs to be packed in the bag. And the other thing with this is that you have to change it up every once in a while. So, you know, if you have a Post-it note somewhere, you get so used to looking at it, you don't read it anymore. And it fails to be the reminder that you were hoping it to be. So changing the color every once in a while, or, you know, changing the luggage tag that it's on, then that novelty is going to help them look at it and remember. You can also do this with, you know, create a visual checklist of the steps to signing in. I mean, we've all seen these when we go through tech trainings, that you take a screenshot of each step and it shows you what you need to do. So this is, I actually asked my niece, she's a freshman now. I asked her last year when she was in 8th grade and she was learning from home to actually count how many screens and clicks so that it took her to get an assignment on Schoology, and it was 38 for one assignment. And so I said, that seems almost impossible to me. And she goes, it's really a pain at first, but after a few days you get used to it, and then it's really fast and you know what to do. And so for her, it was a few days, but for other kids, it's going to be a lot longer than that. Several days, weeks, maybe, until it becomes second nature and they can quickly log themselves in and find what they need to do. In the meantime, they might need something external that's going to point them in the right direction. Desk maps are great. I've seen teachers use them in class. So they have something posted that can show kids exactly what they need to have out. And so they don't have to keep repeating themselves about what they were supposed to take out of their desks or bring with them. And there's just a photo of it. I was in one middle school once, and I was walking down the hall, and there was I think it was an 8th grade math teacher, and I saw these kids going to the door and then turning away and going back, and going to the door and turning away and going back, and I wondered what was going on. And as I approached the door, I saw she had masking tape stretched across the doorway right at their eye level with a page that hanging down from it that said, "Go get your book." So they were all getting there, and they saw the reminder and they went and got a book, and then they went back to class. And so the kids who remembered it, that's great. For the kids that needed something, that external reminder, she gave it to them. They had to go back to the locker and get their book, but then, and they might have been a minute or two late, but then 2 minutes into class, she had every single kid there with their book. And that wasted a whole lot less time than if they had gotten there and they got into class and then realized they didn't have it with them. So just recognizing that some kids are always going to need that external reminder. Instead of, you know, punishing them for not having a pencil, just have an extra can of pencils, you know, everywhere. My husband once said, he said, you know, that's a life skill thing. You don't, if you're at a car dealership and buying a car and you don't have a pen, they're not going to say, "Oh, sorry, you can't do that today." They're going to give you a pen to make sure, you know, anywhere in life, someone will hand you a pen to make sure that you can sign your name. So why don't we do that for them too, instead of try to make them carry this extra load all the time? Pre-headed papers, using graph papers to help them line their numbers up for math. Any pre-formatted Word documents, so they just open it, you know, make a copy and go, so they don't have to think about how to head it each time, is all gonna lighten up that, you know, that processing load. Breaking down assignments into divisible parts. This is actually one thing that I found that we did. And, you know, we turned a 6-part task, big task, into a storyline kind of thing. And we, this was when Sam was applying to the New York State Summer School for the Arts. And we knew it was a couple weeks until the deadline, and he had to get all of his artwork turned into JPEGs and burned onto a disk and mailed with his application materials. So we worked backwards from the deadline, and I figured out, you know, everything. We're going to have to, you know, determine which program he wanted to apply to and read all of the information, print out the forms he had to fill out, get his work onto JPEGs, complete the forms, burn the JPEGs onto a disk, and then put everything in an envelope and mail it. So he helped me work through what he thought he could manage to do in a sitting and focus on, and we broke it into 6 parts. And as he did each one, we colored it in. And so he could see that as he did each step, how close he was getting to the end, to being done with this big project. Because a lot of times they'll do the first task and they'll be like, oh my gosh, that was so much work, I must be done, right? And they're only 1/6 there. Or they get 5/6 of the way and they think, oh, I'm so close, and then they just stop. So if you have something visual externally, they can see, nope, there's just, one more step, come on, we can do it. But if you also look at this, I always thought this was interesting too. So one night he decided the most he can manage was printing forms. But then the next step wasn't to complete them. He had to put the form. That was such a formidable task for him to think about, completing a bunch of forms. And he's like, I'm going to print them off, and then I need to not look at them and do something else the next day. So you really have to let them do that. Like, that wouldn't have made sense to me. I'm like, you print them, you fill them out. But that would have turned him away from the whole thing. So you need to listen to them about what is going to, help them get to that next step. That task initiation, taking a bite out of this big chunk, is hard for them to do. So if it's at all possible, let them decide which bite they want to take and how big each time. And then something visual so they can see how their efforts are adding up to the end. We also did it on index cards too. If there was a bunch of steps, and then you can, like, take the index cards off, staple them together, and then rip them off. And then, you can see the stack it smaller, anything like that. This is what our executive functions do inside. So if you're not doing it internally, it really helps for them to be able to see it. Turning rubrics or grading things into a visual. So a lot of times, if a paper had 6 parts or 7 parts, he would think that each part was the same amount of work and worth the same. So if he had a big paper due, to show him that the cover page is the smallest amount of this project, and that actually writing the 2 big parts of the paper are the big parts, he could, mete out his energy the way that he needed to. But when you just have a checklist and everything is the same size on the list, you can't tell which parts are worth more work than the other ones. Sense of time is always going to be difficult. Mapping things out so that you know how long it's going to take you to get there, or doing a task and actually timing it. How long does it take them to do a math problem? How long does it take them to write a paragraph? How long does it take them to do a worksheet? How long does it take them to get their bag packed? And then when they have some time, they will learn better. If they have 15 minutes, they'll know what they are capable of accomplishing in 15 minutes and what task will fit into that amount of time that they have available, instead of try to take on something too big and then have to leave it in the middle and then maybe not be able to shift back to it and find their place. So if they only have 15 minutes to work on something, it's best if they do something that only takes them 15 minutes and they can wrap it up in that sitting, and then they don't have to leave it and come back to it later. So set alerts, alerts everywhere. I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud because I'm going to jinx it, but he's never lost his phone. And is lost, I think we're at about 15 debit cards and like shoes, keys, but the phone is part of his body, so he doesn't seem to lose that. And there are alerts in it for everything. Leave for work, not just when work starts, but when to leave for work is another alert. You have to work backwards so that you work in travel time in your planner. Domino booking is what I call it, when students, or people plan things and they bump it up. So I have a meeting on campus from 1 to 2, and then I have a meeting in Brighton from 2 to 3. That's not going to work because it's a 15-minute drive. So you can't book things back to back. And you have to actually plan. Some people have to plan the travel time because it's not going to occur to them to leave that space. Schedule appointments for things that should happen daily, so you carve out that time. That works for some people better than others, but that's one thing that we've done. And schedule downtime. You have to replenish, and you to take care of your neurology, and all of the tasks that you have to do in a day are going to eat up your time. So to make sure that one of them is self-care is really important. And then some of the social emotional things, social stories and comic strip conversations, something that they can read to understand how a social situation goes, can be very helpful. Social stories are third-person stories developed by Carol Gray that have been widely used with students with autism, but they can be used in other situations too. So it's just a description of what might happen in a social situation and the best things and the best way to respond to things that come up. So it's something they can understand what the setting's going to be like before they get there. Perspective exercises and thinking, about, they might actually need practice putting themselves in other people's shoes and understand what a conversation looks like from the different people who are involved in it, and role playing essentially. And just like you might map out the steps for a project, you can map out the steps for making plans. Often what would happen is I'm trying to invite somebody to do something on a weekend on Friday afternoon when everyone else was talking about the weekend plans. It occurs to kids to say, oh, I want to make weekend plans too, but then everybody's booked. And they didn't leave enough time and they didn't do it in advance. And so when everybody says, no, I'm busy, I can't make it, it feels like a rejection. And they might not be able to separate that out from, they just didn't leave enough time to make sure that people could actually make plans. It just feels like they're being rejected. Response scales are something that Kari Buren came up with on the incredible 5-point scale. There's several books out there by Kari, and she talks about helping students recognize when they're happy and settled, that's their green 1, all the way up to ready to explode, which is their red 5. And then, what it feels like and what triggers them to move from a 1 to a 5. And some things you really want to catch them by the time they're at a 3, and so they can put some of their calming strategies in place to bring themselves down or remove themselves from a really stressful situation. If things are getting a little too fast-paced and hard to understand, they can take a break. It takes some practice to be able to recognize what your triggers are and as how you're going up the scale, but this can be really effective. Richard Lavoie talks about a social skill autopsy, which just is not a great title, but the idea of it is that if something does go wrong, breaking it down. So you ended up getting in an argument with a friend. Let's figure out where it went off. Maybe it was when he said this and this was your response, and you thought you were responding in a way that was appropriate or productive, but can you understand how he might have been offended by that? And so helping them break down the parts of it and knowing what to do when a similar situation comes up in the future, that practice can be helpful. And then things that strengthen the vent, just getting it to be as efficient as it can so emotion doesn't build up quite as much. Healthy food. Food dyes can be the biggest culprit in weighing food additives, food dyes, preservatives, weigh down our processing. Everybody processes more clearly and the more natural your diet. Regular sleep. Regular exercise, things like that. Anything that can help you process while you are taking in new information. And everybody needs to process with more than one sense. So some people just sitting and looking at these slides and listening to my voice, that's enough. You're engaging enough that you're able to focus on what you're doing. Other people need a little bit more stimulation. So if you're one that, is, playing with your watch or your jewelry or mangling a paper clip or biting your nails, then things like fidgets or different seating devices, semi-inflated cushions and things can help. And it actually can center you and help you make sense of a lot of things that are coming in. One of the things that we found, when he was young is that arriving first to anything that was going to have a crowd helped process as that stimuli came in. So if he was invited to a birthday party and we knew there were going to be a lot of kids there, we would ask if we could arrive 10 minutes early, and I would help, get everything set at the last minute. But he could handle being at a birthday party with 20 kids if he was there first and they came one at a time, versus walking into a party with 20 kids already there. So that was already too much to process. And there was just, they used up all the energy right at first. So those are some strategies for both academics and social skills. So any questions? What questions do you have? Comments, stories?
Feel free to take yourself off of mute and ask questions away, or if you don't feel like that, please share something in the chat and we'll share it to everyone. I found this really great. I mean, a lot of this resonated with some of the things that my own children have faced and gave me some good ideas to think about. I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of the food dyes and the impact. I mean, I know I've heard this, but can you talk to me a little bit more about some of your research or, what you've read about this and how it can impact our children?
We looked into it quite a bit when our kids were younger, and one of the things we didn't follow exactly, and I don't know if you've heard of it before, is the Feingold diet. And it's a little bit of a passe research, but the idea was that eliminating all preservatives from foods can reduce some of the manifestations of some neurologically based disabilities. I didn't agree with it entirely in that it came across a little bit as of a cure, and I don't like the medical model of disability that kids who don't learn typically need to be cured or fixed, because that's absolutely not true. But the idea that they could be more comfortable and not quite as frustrated or stressed is appealing. And so we did look into some ways that, or we tried different things to see if they made a difference. We found red food dye was hugely problematic. And the thing is he's not allergic. So we would do our best to take the food dyes out of his diet. And we saw, a calmer, more comfortable kid who could process a little bit more efficiently. But then he would go to a friend's house and have something red food dye, and it would just, because the system wasn't used to it, then it would just really, throw him for a loop. So we moved to just helping him learn how to moderate it. And, a little bit of junk food here and there is okay, but, 95% of your diet needs to be healthy. And, it's just a good lesson for all of that. But some kids are really, really affected significantly by different preservatives. And I don't know if other folks have looked into it, particularly the BHT, BHA that are in most breakfast cereals and a lot of processed foods. And your general rule of thumb is to shop on the outside of the grocery store. Everything fresh and natural is on the outside, and everything processed and boxed is on the inside. So if you can avoid the inside aisles, it's the general rule of thumb. Has anybody else looked into that or had other experiences? Mine's much more anecdotal when it comes to that, just that I do know how it impacts the neurology, but what worked for us was kind of our hit or miss experimentation.
Does
Anything
anyone else have any more questions? Any thoughts they want to share?
I loved how you talked about breaking down the assignments into the parts and having it visually represented. I think would work for me as well as, my kids. So thank you for that.
Sure. Yeah, that helped. Any picture too of what the end product should look like, when they're really little, showing them what somebody dressed to play in the snow looks like, instead of just say, get your snow clothes on, because then they have to be able to hold in your head, what does that mean? What is that list of snow clothes? And, so it's, and anything that they can visualize is helpful.
Well, thank you so much. I know that this was something a lot of people were looking forward to, wanted to have. I am impressed, I've gotten, like I said, about a dozen requests of people who want to watch this, but have to be at another thing tonight. So
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you so much for your time. And this has been wonderful.
Eleanor, there's a couple things in the chat.
I see fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Taking a lot of good information. Oh, any more strategies, ideas for time management is a question that came up.
Or other resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, time management can be a hard one because what is happening is it's really difficult for them to gauge how much time is passing. And so for those of us that are a little bit better at it, we're working on something and we keep, we can hold on our head, I have to leave in 10 minutes, and we stop ourselves in time because we can kind of feel what it's like for 10 minutes to pass, and we shift gears when we need to. Those types of people are on time. They know how much time to leave to travel. They know how much time it takes them to do different tasks. So for kids, young adults who don't have that, they're not sure how much time is passing. So they're just going to need a lot of practice knowing how long it takes them to do something, or reminders to check their time. So the alerts that they actually make a watch that's pretty affordable, and you can set it to buzz, to just, buzz on your wrist. So it's not going to be a ding that goes off in class or, or something, but it can, and some kids that have used it just because, when they're doing their homework and they start to daydream, and every 10 minutes it buzzes and reminds them that they were supposed to be doing something, and they get back at it. Other kids use it to, they set it for, 15 minutes before they need to be somewhere. So it interrupts them and reminds them to check the time and get going. So that can be helpful too. But it's,
Who
it's
makes that
important.
watch? I'm just curious. Do you know who makes the watch?
I can't remember. Reminder. No, I'll look it up though. I do have it written down somewhere. It's at my office. The brands, I haven't seen one in a while, but
If you can
it's
send it
alert,
to
an
me.
alert watch.
Okay. If you think about it, just send it to me and I can include it in our minutes afterwards. So.
I'm sure you can probably search it on Amazon or Google it or something. But that kind of idea, just and it may not ever be a skill that they have that they can tell how much time is passing. So anything that's going to help them practice it or be reminded will helpful. I know you have other business to do too, but I'm happy to. Oh, there, somebody found, Robin found one. My watch minder. That's it. That was it. Yes, that's right. Thanks, Robin.
You're
Hi,
welcome.
thank you so much for the presentation. I want to know that, my son and I always run into the problem like just mentioned when he came home. I said, "What's your homework?" Exactly like you say. And he said, I say, "Pull out your planner." And he pull it out. But then if I don't go through everything with him, I say, "What's your homework?" And he would say, "Oh, math test." And next question, "What do you do with math test?" So you have to sit down and then break down the step with him. So I think I do see there's a lot of things that, you need to break down with them. But I just don't know that doing a lot of things with him is like he needs support. I mean, my older son has special needs. So I just don't know that to what degree you kind of fed out, because my struggle is that I feel I'm giving a lot of support, for these executive functional skills at home. But, I'm thinking how to help him to become more independent. I can fed out my support. Gradually. Yeah. I don't know if you have any suggestion for that.
Yeah, I mean, you will be their support at first, and coming up with the strategies and showing them how to use it, and then as they get used to it, it should be something that's not going to make them rely on you, but something where they can learn. So you could keep reminding them of when they have to get ready for something, or remind them to get back to work, or you can show them how to use the watch, or show them how to set an alert in their phone. And they're going to need help with it at first, but then you can wean off and scaffold back and kind of pull yourself out of it eventually. And it's going to take them a little bit longer, than it might otherwise, for typical kids, but they do pick up on it. They are going to be able to use these skills and strategies independently eventually. And it just takes, they shouldn't be dependent on another person, something that they are eventually going to be able to do by themselves, even though it's not going to be something they have internally, but they can take with them and use themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Sorry, I have another question because my other kids are the 5th grade students. So I do see now, I start to see, because when he was like, in elementary, 2nd, 3rd grade, I don't see that being organized things is an issue for him, but now it's 5th grade, he came home and I see his paper on this corner, the other on this corner. So we try to say, could you put these things together? And he said, it doesn't bother. I know, as long as I know where I can find my stuff. So I mean, maybe 5th grade is okay, but I start to think, when he go to middle school, there'll be an issue. I don't know, should I pre-train him now as a 5th grader? So do you have any?
Yeah, I think the key thing you said is that if he can find it and he knows where his things are, then messy's fine. I mean, the kids hear a lot at school that things have to be neat, but really what has to happen is you need to be able to find what you need at the time. I think as long as things aren't necessarily getting, broken or lost for, valuable things getting lost forever. If you can put your hands on something when you need it, then, what the right amount of neat and organized is a very subjective thing. So, instead of having your desk neat, we should be saying, make sure you know where your things are.
Okay, thank you.
And my daughter's a great example. She is a total and complete slob. And you walk into a room and it looks like a tornado threw up. And if I say, ask her for something, or ask her if she knows where something is, she'll like dig through a pile and pull it out and say, yeah, she knows exactly where everything is in this sty. So she's a very, very functional slob. But the problem is when it's not functional and it's causing a lot of stress. So
okay, so as long as he could find the things he wants, we'll just let this pass.
yeah.
Okay.
I will self-confess to being a very organized slob, and my mother used to call it my organized chaos, and so that's always been a nickname. Anyway, just FYI.
So
Well, great.
Well, thank you so much. It was great being here. I'll let you go on to the other business that you wanted to do tonight, and let me know if anything else comes up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Our secretary Janita is off tonight, so I'm going to be playing double host as president / secretary of facilitating the meeting, along with Kelsey. But I'm going to, at this point, turn this over to Kelsey. Or no, well, treasurer's report is next. So I guess is that our first order of business is approval of our minutes from our last meeting, right, Kelsey? Keeping me on track here.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So if anyone read the minutes, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting, or suggest if there are any edits or alterations?
I will approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a second from anyone? It can be anyone in the meeting.
Then me.
Great, Kelsey. Terrific. We'll move on to there. So, Kelsey, next up, we move on to treasurer's report, and then we're going to do, I'm going to introduce Jeff Green, but so carry on.
Awesome. So I'm just going to do this super quick this time, because the numbers that people mostly are interested are going to be these ones right here. Can everyone see that CRPS has 570.04? And then you've got the other numbers for FRES, TCMS, BHS. We did have some activity nights, so these numbers have gone up mostly, although the class of 2028 had theirs canceled for Blizzard. So that sucked because they still had to pay for the DJ.
Aww.
The only other thing that's really changed a lot is that where was it? Festival of Ideas has taken in $4,325. So this is in the section of money that we owe, so that's why it's negative. Does anyone have any questions?
This is Monica. I have one question. I know we've, covered things for kids in the past. Is there any thought to maybe cover the DJ for the class of 28, since it really wasn't their fault that?
I think that's a fantastic idea. If you would like to move that we vote on such a proposal now, I'm happy to second it.
I would like to move that we vote on that.
All righty.
I would like to
So
second
there's-
her motion. I don't know if I'm allowed to. I think I am. I'm taking executive privilege. Anyone opposed
Alrighty.
to this motion? Because with our Zoom meetings, we have found this is much more useful. If you are opposed, please either raise your little cartoon hand, or you can send me a private message or put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Seeing no opposition, I am going to say the motion is approved. Terrific.
Thank you.
All right, great. Jeff, are you around? I see your video is off, but I just want to make sure that you're still, oh, great. You're here. Perfect.
Around.
Awesome. So it is my dear pleasure. Last week, I had the honor and privilege of meeting Mr. Jeffrey Green, who is our new Director of Student and Family Engagement. His job description is growing by the day, because while he was hired with the job description, it was other duties as assigned, and he keeps getting assigned duties from what I can tell. So no, but I just wanted to give you all an opportunity. He's going to be a great resource for PTSA as well as all parents in the district. Love to give you the floor, Jeff, if you'd like to give a few minutes to just kind of introduce yourself and chat about what you're doing.
Sure. Thank you for the warm welcome, Eleanor. It was great meeting with you as well. And I am excited. I can already Miss Samper. I feel like I've seen you everywhere. So sorry for the redundancy. It's good to keep seeing you, but you're kind of hearing the same thing. I am the new Director of Student and Family Engagement. And part of my role, I'm not going to get into everything right now, but part of my role is just going to be to be a liaison for families, an additional, not replacing anybody, an additional resource for families for various reasons, good or bad. And when it comes to PTSA, Eleanor and I had a really good conversation regarding some of the ideas down the line that maybe we can partner with to where I can just, be an additional thinking partner or support the group. So if you would continue to have me, I'd love to join, just to be in the know that that presentation was powerful and it was very knowledgeable, and I was taking mental notes for my own kids who with some of the items, but I'm really excited about being in the district. I know that it's going to take time for my role to develop, because a lot of people are going to have to, I'm not a resource that people don't know about me. So I'm kind of on my welcome tour, and it's going to take quite a while, and I'm starting in the middle of a school year, and a lot of people don't know. So I've been spending a lot of time at TCMS. I'm working with their administrative team more in like the planning stages. I'm not an assistant principal, and I'm not there all day, but I've been there mostly during the lunches, just trying to build relationships with students, connecting with them, trying to become a familiar face for them, so that one of the things I'm going to be doing is working on transitions K-12. So with the hope that when students are moving and they see me in other buildings, I'll be a familiar face. So I've had a chance to really start to build some good relationships with some of the kids. My understanding is this is K-12, correct? Any parent in the district can be on this. So if you have a student at Council Rock or Frez, most of the kids have not seen me because I haven't been there as much. And if you have a high schooler, some of them have seen me, but I've really been at TCMS most of my time, and that's kind of the plan for the remainder of the school year. But long term, I do plan on being, even though I'm spread thin right now, spread thin even more throughout the district. And like I said, just being a resource, and down the line 3, 4, 5 years from now, as kids move along their journey in Brighton, I will be a person that can be there to support. So I'm, like I said, I'm on my welcome tour. I am meeting literally hundreds of people, and I can't keep up with names unless I have like this helps because I actually am a person where I need to be able to see a name with a face to help me remember. Most times I'm just shaking hands and seeing people in passing, and people have been wonderful coming up to me, introducing themselves. So I'm sorry if I'm not going to remember your name. I remember faces. And I'm just going to try my best to support however I can. So thank you for having me here. And I hope that we have an opportunity to engage with each other throughout the years, I should say. So please, my door is always open if you need anything. And if I don't have the answer, I can try my best to try to find it. So I don't know if anybody has any questions for me. I know it's late, but I'm here if you are willing to ask me anything.
Please feel free to unmute yourself or put it in chat. Does anyone have any questions? He's going to be attending every single one of our PTSA meetings, I've been told. So we get the joy and privilege of his presence.
Jeff, I'm so sorry.
Most. I'm going to try my best to attend most. I do have 3 young kids as well, and a lovely, beautiful wife as well. So it's important to me, speaking of parents, that I'm a present father as well. So I'm trying to balance my professional responsibilities with also being a dad. So I'm really going to be committed to being at as many as possible. But I want to say that, you know, that's one of the reasons why I muted myself in, because I have 3 kids under 6 years old, and it's be a madhouse for any of you that have multiple kids. So, but I love them to pieces, and I'm definitely committed to partnering with this group. So
awesome. Thanks, Jeff. All right, given the hour of the day, we are going to move on to new business open discussion. Spirit, where I'm going to be the committee rep to just really quickly tell you, there is a sale coming up. There should be more information that'll be sent out right after February break. So stay tuned for that. We have some great items that'll be up for sale. DEI events. I know I saw Tamika on earlier, but I think she's left. Does anyone on the DEI committee here? I know they've got some really cool events coming up. So we will have more about that soon. Or Jeff, were you going to say something? Sorry. No.
I don't know if this is the same thing. I'm still learning. I do know that throughout the district, there were DEI meetings that were scheduled on that Thursday before the snowstorm, and then they all got canceled and they got moved to the next month.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure if we were talking about the same thing, but I do know that meetings were planned and then they all got moved to March. So
cool. Great. Thank you. And then nominating committee. Unfortunately, Kelsey and Manish will be stepping down from their positions as there have been as their 2-year terms are up. And so we will be accepting nominations for treasurer and vice president for PTSA. And so we are looking for a chair for our nominating committee. Is there anyone that is here tonight that wishes to nominate themselves or nominate someone else to be the nominating committee chairperson? I know this sounds like we'd like nominations for a nominating committee. I know I nominate Manish to, I don't know if I'm allowed to nominate people. Am I, Kelsey?
I don't see any reason you can't nominate people, but I think having them actually take the position without being here would be really mean. Admittedly, I was once part of an academic department where they voted someone to be the chair because he was out of the country and couldn't object. But I don't think we can do that.
I think that's what happened to me last year. So I think that's totally fair to do, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe I've heard verbally from Manish that I warned him I might be nominating him in his absence, that he accepts, but he accepts the nomination, but we will officially do this probably over email in the next little bit. So, but if there are any other nominations, or you hear of anybody else, we will be leaving this open for the next week or so. But we do want to get started with that. Also, if you know of anyone who you think would be a great vice president or treasurer, please let us know. Okay. And I think that's it. Kelsey, other new business. Not it?
So,
Great.
yeah, that was not it for the
Yes.
rest of the work there. So did you want to do building
Building
reports, or
reports,
shall
yep.
we? Okay.
I was gonna say, if you can do the 90-second building reports, I challenge anyone who is here. We will give you more than that if you need that, but still. We'll start with Council Rock. Council Rock.
Oh, sorry, that's me. Okay. All right, you want me to just to go through some of the things we've been doing?
Yep.
All right, so the other Monica and I, we appreciated our nurses, and all of the nurses that work in our 4 buildings received a nice card, some flowers, some nurse cookies, and a gift card to Treetown Cafe. So they were very appreciative of that. We know that they're really on the receiving end of a lot of the issues that are going on with COVID and quarantining and everything. So we wanted to celebrate them. And then the 3 of us co-chairs, we went to the kindergarten orientation parent meeting that was held a couple weeks ago. And a big event we just had this week on Monday was the Super Bowl luncheon for all of the teachers. So we had lots of soups and crock pots and rolls and cookies, and it was just decorated so beautifully by Sarah. She's our hospitality chair. She's doing a fabulous job. And let's see, we are still continuing with library helpers and recycling helpers. And one thing we looked into that we decided to kind of hold off on after talking with Matt Tappan was a company came to us called Apex Leadership Learning, or Apex Leadership Company, wanting for us to do a fundraising with them about I don't know, we raise money and then have like a 5K or an obstacle course. We're kind of, that is on hold for now. We are considering kind of offering something in-house for that, possibly talking to the Frez co-chairs and seeing if we want to do something with them. So it's in the works, but nothing much further than that. The ice cream social and the book fair are being worked on and planned in conjunction with open house, and that's all in the beginning of April. And then next couple things is our next Fun Food Friday is February 18th. So this Friday, and it's Snap Peas. And then we're also providing to-go snacks and drinks for the one more faculty meeting in February. So that's what we've been doing.
Great. Thanks, Monica. Anyone here from Frez? Going once. Going twice. I know TCMS said they are not going to be present tonight. And so I'm going to skip them. Though TCMS is moving along with activity nights and such, Frez I know is as well. And I believe they're planning another bingo night for this spring, I think is their update. And now I am moving on to BHS.
Does that mean I get like 5 minutes?
Sure.
I won't take 5 minutes. Okay, we had our January 19th Meet the Principal meeting where Dr. Hall, spoke at length about program planning for next year, the graduation requirements, flex, and his favorite topic is lunch. He loves talking about lunch. Okay, and then January 27th, we had our 8th grade parent orientation. It was in person and via live feed. We had a very, very good turnout. And again, program planning, graduation requirements, flex, and lunch. Lunch. The Say Yes to the Dress program is actually happening tomorrow. So if you know anyone that wants to participate in this program, it's happening from 8 a.m. till 3:30 in the BHS auditorium. We have a couple upcoming meetings with the principal. We don't have one for February because of the way break fell. Our next one, we're actually having a special add-on one, so I need to get the word out. March 1st, I know, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's going to be a joint meeting with BHS and TCMS led by Dr. Allison Rio. And then March 24th, there is a transition to college for students who need extra support, and that will be a panel discussion. And then while I'm here, there's another one coming up April 27th, which is going to talk about transitioning from high school for students with IEPs or 529s. And that's going to be held or presented by Rachel Rosner of Autism Up. And that's it. And that was definitely under 5 minutes. You're welcome.
You did that in 2. Well done. Okay. Is there any other business or in questions that anyone that is still here in this meeting have, or points that they would like to bring up, or questions they have about anything? Go
So
for it,
I
Kelsey.
actually did want to put on people's radar. I don't want to have a discussion about it tonight because we don't have that many people. It's late, but we've had some sort of confusing discussions about which fundraising goes where. So traditionally, apparently, it was the case that things like basically almost all fundraisers pretty much just went straight into the main pot. When I took over as treasurer, the thing that I was trying to set up an arrangement for was hospitality. Now, hospitality has all been traditionally, years ago, just donations of food. So each individual building kind of handled that their own way. And so all of the donations that people were asking for that were monetary donations with which to pay for food so that we could try and accomplish much the same goal, those were going to individual buildings. And that's how I've been just sort of doing everything else since then. So my assumption is that, or was, that if a building is doing some fundraising, then they get to decide whether that goes to that building or to central PTSA. And some people who have a lot more history with how the financials were working out were like, hey, that's not how it used to be. We as a board get to decide how we want this to be. So think about that. We'll talk about it next meeting.
That sounds great. I know the other thing that we're going to talk about in our next meeting, just to put this on people's radars, is fundraising and sort of general central approvals of new fundraising endeavors. And so this is just not less of an approval process than a notification and opportunity for comment process. I'm going to put it that way. We are not going to say yes or no to fundraising, but we would like people to say, this is the fundraising I am thinking of doing and the proceeds that I believe it will bring in. Do we think this is a good idea for PTSA? And then we will be able to comment and say yes or no. And I think that that's more of the way I would like to look at this than an approval process. Any questions about that? No. Okay. Last thing that I would like to just share with all of you that are on, we are in the middle of budget approval process for the spring. I know there's been a thought exchange up. I've had conversations with Kevin about the possibility, Kevin McGowan, about the possibility of taking some of the lead things and either putting them out in a poll or a more focused thought exchange so that we don't have to filter through 300 comments to try and give our feedback for what people want and don't want in the budget. But at the same time, just to let you know, please participate in that. Consider going to community forums. This matters. This matters in terms of what we want our board and our schools to steer our budget monies toward. And just to kind of take a look at that is a great idea for all of us. Any other thoughts or questions, comments? Anything from the peanut gallery? No. Do we have a motion to end the meeting? Elsie.
I second.
Great. Anyone opposed? All right. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for coming to the presentation. Thank you for the 12 of you for hanging in there till the end of this. I guess we're now down to 10. But anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Enjoy this warmish weather while it lasts for the next 6 hours. Have a good night, all.
Bye.
Bye.